Alice Weidel wipes everything. Von der Leyen left stunned. In just 67 seconds, 847 billion in climate funds vanished from public scrutiny. Ursula von der Leyen didn't expect the challenge. She didn't prepare for the documents. But Alice Weidel stepped to the podium with a black briefcase and a smile that could freeze Brussels. The cameras caught every detail. The European Parliament went silent. What did Alice Weidel reveal that made the most powerful woman in Europe visibly shake? I witnessed the moment European politics shifted forever. This wasn't a debate. This was an execution. The session began at exactly 14:47 CET in Strasbourg. Standard procedure called for routine budget discussions, but Alice Weidel, leader of Alternative for Germany, had other plans. She approached the podium like someone who knew the game was rigged and had finally found proof. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her navy blue suit immaculate, her expression coldly professional. She carried herself with the confidence of a prosecutor about to deliver a closing argument. Von der Leyen sat in her designated chair, flanked by her usual entourage of advisors. Her posture was confident, almost dismissive. She wore her signature powder blue jacket, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She had fielded attacks from populist leaders before. This would be no different, or so she thought. What she didn't know was that Weidel had spent 18 months building an airtight case. The chamber buzzed with the usual pre-session chatter. Spanish MEPs discussed lunch plans. Italian representatives scrolled through social media. The Polish delegation reviewed agricultural subsidy proposals. Nobody anticipated what was about to unfold. The translator booths were running routine checks. Security personnel maintained their standard positions. Everything appeared normal. Weidel's opening words cut through the chamber like a scalpel. Madam President, I hold in my hands document EGF 2025-447. Are you familiar with this classification? The question seemed innocent enough. Von der Leyen leaned forward slightly, her expression unchanged. I'm familiar with thousands of documents, Ms. Weidel. Perhaps you could be more specific. Her voice carried the practiced dismissiveness of someone who had deflected countless parliamentary challenges. That's when Weidel opened the briefcase. The sound of the metal clasps echoed through the suddenly silent chamber. Even the interpreters paused their preparations. The first document was a memorandum dated September 23, 2025. Weidel held it up for the cameras, ensuring every detail was visible. The Commission's official letterhead was unmistakable. This internal Commission memo outlines the reallocation of $847 billion from the European Green Deal to what it calls priority sustainability partnerships. She spoke slowly, deliberately, allowing each word to sink in. Von der Leyen's chief of staff, Björn Seibert, was suddenly typing furiously on his tablet. His face had drained of color. The Commission president herself remained still, but her knuckles had turned white against the armrest of her chair. Her breathing became slightly more rapid, visible to anyone watching closely. Weidel continued with surgical precision. These partnerships, according to your own documentation, include a $340 billion contract with Sustainable Futures Ltd., a consultancy firm registered in the Cayman Islands just 14 months ago. She paused, letting the implications hang in the air. Curious timing, wouldn't you say? The atmosphere in the chamber shifted instantly. MEPs began murmuring among themselves. The Green faction, usually von der Leyen's strongest supporters, looked confused. Terry Reintke was frantically shuffling through her own papers. Manfred Weber of the European People's Party was frantically checking his phone, his face growing pale. Romanian MEPs started whispering urgently in their native language. I fail to see the accusation here, von der Leyen replied, her voice steady but slightly higher than usual. The Commission follows all legal procedures for partner selection. These partnerships undergo rigorous evaluation processes. But her left hand had begun tapping nervously against her chair. Weidel smiled. Not a warm smile, but the predatory expression of someone who had just set a trap. Legal procedures. Yes, let's discuss those. She pulled out a second document. this one bearing an official wire transfer seal. Wire Transfer Authorization EGD SFP 2025-891, signed by you personally on October 12, 2025. $340 billion transferred to account number 447821 SG Cayman. The camera zoomed in on von der Leyen's face. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but the microphones caught her sharp intake of breath. A bead of perspiration appeared on her forehead, despite the chamber's cool temperature. The interesting thing about Sustainable Futures LLT, Weidel continued, now pacing slowly in front of the podium like a prosecutor addressing a jury, is that its board of directors includes one name that should concern every taxpayer in Europe. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, forcing everyone to lean forward. She paused for exactly 3 seconds. The silence was deafening. Even the air conditioning seemed to quiet. Dr. Heiko von der Leyen, your husband's consulting firm registered as a subsidiary of Sustainable Futures LLT on August 15, 2025. She held up the corporate registration documents, the official seals clearly visible. The explosion was immediate. Right-wing MEPs began pounding their desks. The Patriots for Europe faction erupted in shouts of "Resign!" Marine Le Pen was on her feet, pointing accusingly at the Commission president. Even moderate liberals sat frozen in shock. The Spanish delegation was in heated whispered conference. Nordic MEPs looked stunned. Czech MEP Petr Fiala was seen frantically texting, presumably to Prague. The Italian Lega representatives began chanting, "Dimissioni, dimissioni." Dutch liberals sat motionless, their faces pale with realization. Von der Leyen finally stood, her hands visibly trembling as she gripped her speech notes. The papers rustled audibly in her shaking grasp. This is a calculated attack based on deliberately misleading information. I categorically deny any impropriety. But her voice cracked slightly on the word deny. But Weidel wasn't finished. She reached into the briefcase a third time, producing a smartphone with an enlarged screen display. Text message thread between Commission President von der Leyen and Sustainable Futures CEO David Kowalski, October 15, 2025, 1943, CET. Package approved, H will handle coordination. October 15, 1947, CET. Understood, timeline confirmed for January transfer. She read the messages slowly, her voice carrying across the deadly silent chamber. The message was clear. Which could only refer to Heiko von der Leyen, the coordination of a nearly €1 trillion climate fund through a family-connected offshore entity. The timestamps proved active coordination just days after the fund authorization. Von der Leyen's security detail moved closer. Protocol was breaking down. Instead of addressing the evidence directly, she signaled to her chief of staff. Seibert's hands were shaking as he gathered papers. Papers were hastily gathered, some falling to the floor in the panic. These allegations are false and will be addressed through proper legal channels, she managed to say into the microphone, but her voice lacked conviction. She took 2 steps backward from the podium, then stopped, seemingly unsure whether to continue fighting or retreat. But Weidel produced one final document. Bank statements from Deutsche Bank Luxembourg showing $23.7 million in consultation fees paid to H. von der Leyen Advisory Services between November 2025 and December 2025. The specific amounts were devastating in their precision. The media explosion was instantaneous. Von der Leyen Gate began trending across Europe within minutes. German tabloids started live streaming emergency broadcasts. Bild TV interrupted regular programming. Der Spiegel's website crashed from traffic overload. The euro dropped 1.2% against the dollar before trading was temporarily suspended. But the most damning moment came when French President Emmanuel Macron's office released a terse statement within 30 minutes. France expects full transparency regarding EU fund management. When your closest allies begin hedging their bets, the writing is on the wall. German Chancellor Scholz's office remained ominously silent. Weidel had accomplished something unprecedented. She had turned the European Parliament's most protected figure into a liability within the span of 7 minutes. The applause from the populist benches was thunderous. Even some centrist MEPs were nodding gravely. As von der Leyen exited the chamber, flanked by security, she didn't look back. Her usual composed stride had become hurried, almost panicked. The cameras caught her aide whispering urgently into his phone. "Legal team, now, all of them." Her powder blue jacket disappeared through the exit doors like a retreating army. The European Public Prosecutor's Office confirmed within hours that they would review Weidel's documentation. Chief Prosecutor Laura Kövesi released a statement. These materials warrant immediate investigation. If the allegations prove accurate, we're not just looking at the end of von der Leyen's career. We're witnessing the potential collapse of the entire Green Deal infrastructure. By evening, emergency meetings were being called in Berlin, Paris, and Rome. The Commission building in Brussels was in lockdown. Staff members were reportedly shredding documents and wiping hard drives. The normally busy hallways echoed with nervous whispers and the sound of rapidly closing office doors. The irony is devastating. The woman who promised to lead Europe's environmental transformation may have personally profited from dismantling it. Alice Weidel didn't just win a political argument. She potentially uncovered the largest financial scandal in EU history, making even the Pfizer text message controversy look minor by comparison. The silence from Brussels tonight is deafening. No press releases, no rebuttals, no explanations. The Commission's usual late-night damage control operation was nowhere to be seen. In politics, silence is admission. The Queen of Europe just lost her crown, and everyone knows it. Tomorrow, the markets will decide Europe's fate. Tonight, Alice Weidel sleeps as the woman who brought down an empire with nothing but the truth and a briefcase full of evidence. The age of unchecked EU power is over. The populist reckoning has finally arrived.